Hello, everybody. Welcome back to True Gunners TV. We're back again, of course, to talk about last night, or this morning, depending on where you are in the country or which country you're in, I suppose. Arsenal's victory over Barcelona in their final preseason game in the United States. An emphatic victory as well, by the way. Very, very, very good performance by Arsenal. Something that I've been craving to see since the Manchester United game, of course. And I am back again, and I am back with another special guest. But before we go any further, guys, make sure you're hitting that like button. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel as well. I do my research, by the way, and I noticed that over 50% of you that watch this channel are not actually subscribed. So make sure you are doing that, guys. Make sure you are doing that. It's like I say to my kids, yeah, I can't keep bringing treats and giving you treats, yeah, if you're not gonna help out. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to earn your treats, and that includes smashing up them likes, hitting that subscribe button, and of course the notification bell as well. And look, the guest that I'm bringing on today, she's been here once before. We did very good numbers, in fact, and I'm sure you guys enjoyed the video as much as what I did as well. Love talking to this person as well about Arsenal, and that is none other than, and I'm going to say this very quietly because I don't want to get into trouble with the wife, of course, and Mr. Flewers if he's watching. The lovely, the wonderful Jess from She Knows Arsenal. How are we doing?
I am so good. I'm happy to be speaking to you after the win. You seem happy today, so I'm happy about that. But yeah, I'm happy to be on. Excited to talk about this because I feel like there's so many different layers to peel back. So yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
Okay, yeah, definitely more happy. Definitely after the United performance, I thought, oh no, what's happening? But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely more happy. Definitely much better performance by Arsenal. But of course, before we get into talking about the game itself, you're over there in America, Jess. We kind of all know that. You went to the game last night. We see you on AFTV. Big up yourself on AFTV, like faming
I
it
haven't
out.
even watched it back because I'm like, no, I don't even want to know what I said because I
Ah,
forgot.
I see you, Jess. I see you. It's all good. And look, I wanted to get a gauge on the stadium
Mm,
and the atmosphere out there in America, because from what I've seen from all three Arsenal preseason fixtures, is the
mm,
atmosphere looks like it is absolutely immense. Like these stadiums are not small stadiums either. They're big stadiums.
mm.
They look to
Yeah.
be packed out almost 90%, if not more. Last night's game in particular, it weren't just full of Arsenal fans, of course, Barcelona fans as well. It looked like a Champions League night. That's how I would put it. So, like, obviously, being in the stadium, being over there, seeing all the fans around, like, what's it like, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, well, just starting off with SoFi, like it's the best stadium in the world. It's obvious. It's owned by KSC. It's owned by the Kroenkes. The Rams and the Chargers both play there, and it's just so like state of the art, the best of the best of the best of the best. When you walk into just even like start walking over toward there, you can really see like this is a serious stadium, and they put a lot of money and hard work into it. And so I was really hoping that SoFi Stadium would have the capabilities to hold football matches because if it didn't, there's probably no reason for me to be inside, you know? And so I was happy to see that we played there yesterday. And I mean, I was up high because one, I was being cheap, and two, like, you know, I like being on the long side and being able to kind of like see over. And it was just like straight down. There were so many seats. It was full. I would say only like maybe the couple of seats behind me because I was at the very top were like empty, but it was almost full. And when you're in a stadium like that and you're around a bunch of Barcelona fans, but people are singing North London Forever, and in that stadium, you realize that Arsenal are really out here in these streets. Like Arsenal is really a massive club that people follow from all around the world. And I met somebody yesterday that was saying that, he flew in from Australia on that day and was flying out today, so, well, yesterday he flew in, watch the game, and then fly out. That's a long flight just to watch Arsenal play in a preseason match that doesn't really mean anything. And just the amount of people that were there, the commitment, the fans really know what they're talking about. It's not like casual fans that just kind of, no, these people love Arsenal. They're diehard, and they're just so happy to see, the team come to the United States. So the vibes have been so good. I don't know what it was like, in New York or DC, but I'm sure it was the same. But last night, I mean, even after the game, a bunch of Arsenal fans just stayed in the concourse and were just like singing songs and dancing and having a good time. And the one thing about the Arsenal fan base is it's really a community. And when you get around people, you realize that everybody's just so kind and just loves the team and loves the club so much. And yeah, I enjoyed myself. That's why like my voice is a little rough. I'm a little bit tired, but yeah, the vibes are definitely there. And we're really out here in these streets. Like Arsenal is really well represented in the US.
That's crazy. Like someone to fly over from Australia to watch the game and then get a flight back the following day. That's madness. Like Arsenal fans are crazy, like all over the
We
world.
love our team. When we love Arsenal, we love hard. You know that. So
Yeah, and it just shows how global we are as a fan base as well. I've always like kind of enjoyed over the past couple of seasons Arsenal, doing their pre-season over in America. They really make it a proper event. You don't really think it's like pre-season or anything like that. It just seems like another event. It's like the way they put like these things on is almost like similar to the NBA kind of thing. Like they make a big thing of all of this. So big up the Americans and everything that they're doing out there, hosting, all these British teams and helping to grow the global fan base as well. And of course, all the fans that are out there that have been watching, that have spent their money to go over there and see the team in,
yeah.
Games that don't even mean anything really. It's just a warm up. So yeah,
Yeah.
big up to everybody in that. But of course, the Manchester United game, I suppose we do have to kind of touch on that one a little bit
Yeah.
because it kind of brings us into, of course, last night's game, which was a lot better. What did you make of the United game, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't great. Like, I'm not even about to sit here and act like, you know, the game was, there was not much positivity to take from it. I think some alarm bells started to ring, in a lot of people's ears, like what's going on? The midfield doesn't look fluid. Everybody seemed off. Like the first thing I realized is that we were not up to the physical level. Like I thought we looked weak in the tackle. We looked gassed every time we ran. And, I think it was just exacerbated by the fact that it was Man United and they're seen as the team that's kind of chasing us down. And they clearly wanted to make a statement. I think that was another part of it as well. I think they made a point of like, we're here. You're the team that we're taking down. It very much so had those vibes. So losing, it was hard to keep that perspective of it's just preseason when it's your nemesis and you're like, but I think what it more than anything is you could have stomached a loss if the performance had been better. And I have to be honest, the performance was really poor. And I wouldn't be surprised if Arteta got into them about that because they just seemed like they were on cruise control and, it just wasn't Arsenal. It just wasn't. So beyond like the fitness issues and not being up to the physical battle, I just thought there was a lot of questions around the midfield. And I can understand why he had to address it in his most recent press conference because a lot of Arsenal fans were really concerned about, Rice and Havertz coming into that midfield and things not clicking right away. And so in Nottingham Forest, should we just go with Partey and Rice, like to feel safe? So I think after that game, there was a lot of question marks and a little bit of panic. But I think after the game against Barcelona, a lot of that panic was put to rest. And I have some inklings about why that happened. But, I think we needed to see the team look like itself in order to feel confident going into the season because it's only 2 games until we go in,
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny actually because like the midfield was definitely the issue against Manchester United. There's no question about that. Obviously, the defensive mistakes don't help. Aaron Ramsdale, for an example, we've seen him do that number of times for Arsenal. He needs to kind of brush up on that, shots that he should be saving, that he's conceding, and that. Gabriel, the only thing I would say is I'd rather these players get their mistakes out of the way now before the season starts. Of course, we see, Saka miss a penalty yesterday as well. But do you think, like, in terms of the midfield, like I look at yesterday, for example, of course, Havertz scored, he had a better performance and that. Do you think with us having both Rice and Havertz trying to integrate into the midfield, it's just too many changes in that area at once? Because that's the thing that worries me. Like, I think you can afford to, lose Granit Xhaka and replace him with another player, as long as you've got Partey playing behind, who's used to playing in this sort of Arsenal team and knows what is expected in that position. And then you've got an Odegaard. Like, I just feel like having Rice and Havertz in this midfield with Odegaard, it's too many changes in that area at once. And I think that's kind of what we see yesterday more than anything else. With one player coming in and one player coming out, it doesn't really change the dynamic too much. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say I think Thomas Partey did give like a feeling of like cozy blanket. Like, this is what we know, feel safe. He knows how it goes. And Thomas Partey has been here this is just going to be his fourth season or something like that. So he has taken some time to learn that position, and it's not an easy position to play. There's a lot asked of you in it. So to just plop Rice right in there and say, go, after we know what Thomas Partey has been like, it's tough, So seeing him come in, I think that really helped, because then the buildup was a little bit more smooth. And without buildup, we're nothing, And I think against United, the buildup was just like non-existent. So I do think that helped. But I also think what helped is having some sort of continuity behind and in front of the midfield. I think having Nketiah in the starting lineup, it just wasn't working. We needed to see Jesus in there with Saka and Trossard, because Trossard is like one of the people now. Like, even though he's only been here for like half a season, we know him, he knows us, he can play our style. So having him in there instead of Martinelli doesn't hurt you. But having Nketiah in there instead of Jesus, there's nothing to play off of. The link up was dead. And Jesus does such a good job of going from right to left and doing the switching and allowing Trossard and Odegaard to fill those spots as well. And so I thought that really helped. And then at the back, you had Gabriel and Saliba and White, with Saliba in the middle as the sweeper. Against United, Gabriel was in the middle, because remember, Tomiyasu was on the left and Timber was inverting. It was too much back there. I thought that also was just too much. So having Timber just go on to the left and having the back three be what we've known it to be all for the last season, I think that helped too. So I'm not sure if it was just Thomas Partey and just having one change in the midfield. I think having the front line and the back line look like something from last season definitely helped too.
Yeah, I agree as well. And it's a headache for Arteta this season, really, because he's going to have to bring these players in and integrate them in at the right time. Like, Terry pointed something out to me the other day on the Top Six show, and he kind of said to me, £105 million for Declan Rice. We see Manchester City pay £100 million for Jack Grealish, but Pep Guardiola knew when to bring Jack Grealish into the team. He knew when to integrate him in. He didn't just throw him in at the deep end because he's £100 million signing. And Arteta's got to do a similar thing with Rice, similar thing with Havertz. Don't just play these players just because you've spent that money on them. Like, you're going to have to integrate them at the right time to not have too much of an effect on the team. And I think, he kind of gauged that a little bit against Manchester United, no doubt, because like you say, we had no real control in that midfield. We got bossed by a 17, 18-year-old kid. And I think that will have helped Arteta as well, kind of learn from that. So hopefully, going into the season, he doesn't make the same mistakes again. And you're definitely right about, Nketiah and Jesus. And this is why I think we still need a striker personally, because I think, if Jesus happens to get an injury again, and I know it's if buts and maybes, but with Champions League games and Premier League games, FA Cups, League Cups, and that. And there's going to be more injuries this season, no doubt. Because players are going to be expected to play more games. So, and we see that Eddie Nketiah is not good enough. Balogun as well didn't get an opportunity against Manchester United. That surprised me, Jess. Did it surprise you?
Really? A little bit, but then at the same time, I know people were like, "Oh, what's going on there?" I just think we're really close to selling him. I think that's just the truth. I think people assume because he's now a US international and he's from Brooklyn, so he would obviously start at MetLife. But what's more important than him starting at MetLife is us protecting the asset if we're going to sell him. And so the last thing you want is him tweaking an ankle. Look at the pitches. Let's just be real. And MetLife was awful. And, playing in this SoFi Stadium, as beautiful as it is, nobody wants to play on turf. So I think from that perspective, you have to look at it and say, yeah, if you feel like it's too far gone to save, meaning Balogun, coming into Arsenal and wanting to stay, then what becomes more important is protecting the asset. And I think that's all that Arsenal did. I'm 100% okay with us selling Balogun on. I think he doesn't want to, not necessarily doesn't want to be at Arsenal, but he doesn't want to fight for a spot at Arsenal. That's fine. But I want, I feel like Eddie also should probably go too. I don't see where he's going to get his minutes from because we differ on this. I don't actually think we need a striker. I actually think Trossard is the perfect option to come in for Jesus if he was not to play. So where does Eddie get the minutes? I'm not sure. But in terms of, Balogun, yeah, I was surprised, but then it made sense to me. But what doesn't make sense to me is Eddie Nketiah. I don't know where he fits in. And that's more stressful to me than Balogun because what is he about to do? What is he about to do? He hasn't scored at all during this preseason. He hasn't looked like scoring. He looks a little, against United, what really pissed me off was that really well-worked free kick that we had. And all he had to do was just square it to Saka or Rice. And he didn't. And he tried to shoot with his left. I was just like, yeah. So I think both of their futures are kind of up for debate. But how do you feel about I think you would be okay with Eddie going too, right? This time around? Or do you think it's too much because, we don't have another striker and we may not get one?
I mean, to be honest with you, I've always had the view that, I think we need another striker anyway, just a player that can offer us something different off the bench, because there's going to be games this season where we're going to get found out a little bit. Teams are going to kind of work out how to play against us. If you've got nothing that's coming off the bench that offers you something different, that's where the problem is with me. And I did originally think, maybe Balogun could be that guy, but I think you're right. I think Arsenal are almost, pretty much looking to sell him. He's probably almost gone because, the only thing that surprised me, like I say, was the Man United game. I thought, with the guy coming back, screaming for opportunities, that was the perfect game for Arteta to give him an opportunity if he was going to give him an opportunity, because you're up against Premier League opposition. They're one of our rivals in the league. Okay, it's only pre-season, but it's the perfect time to take a look at Balogun and see what he's all about, see if he can actually hack it in the Premier League, because a lot of, fans will put against him that, yes, he scored 22 goals in the French league last season. He looks prolific, but it is only the French league. Can he do it in the Premier League against Premier League opposition? So I think you're right. Yeah. I think he definitely, looks like he's moving on. And the same with Eddie Nketiah. I've said for a long time that I don't believe Eddie Nketiah is of the level to, take Arsenal to where we need to be. And with him being a second choice or an off the bench option, you don't necessarily have to be at the level. But at the same time, I look at it and think, well, if we had injuries to Jesus and Trossard and Eddie Nketiah was relied upon, can we trust him to come in and maintain the level that we're going to see from them other two guys? And it's harsh to say it because, me and you, Jess, obviously we was in London after the Man United game. Eddie Nketiah scored the winner. He was on a roll, scored 5 goals in 4 games. And we were sitting there going, oh, actually, maybe Eddie's proven us wrong a little bit. But I don't
Mm.
know. There's this stigma around Eddie Nketiah where I just, I don't know. I don't know about this guy's ability. Like, it
Well,
doesn't.
like, I feel like most of us, we know, like, deep down sometimes, like, if a player is good enough. I think there's questions around certain players, but there's some players where I just feel like your gut instinct is probably right. And I I like, just an example, like, Eddie Nketiah has been around for a while now, and I think he's pretty much reached the level that he's gonna be at. I looked at that guy that Chelsea bought, that Nicholas Jackson or whatever. I think he's better than Eddie. I do. I've seen him play in a couple games. I think he's better than Eddie. I think his ceiling is higher. Like, you just get a feeling about players. Like, Eddie is a mid-table to lower mid-table striker. That's what he is. Probably not European level, but probably just right about from Crystal Palace down. And so there's no reason to dress it up any differently than that. He's just not that guy, And I think Balogun he's probably more gifted and probably will have a better career. There's a reason why Inter Milan is looking at Balogun and not at Nketiah, and I think the types of teams that are looking at the players makes it even more obvious. So I don't think we need to dress it up any sort of way. Eddie's just not good enough for Arsenal, and I know that we re-signed him and Arteta really likes him, but you know, I just can't see a world where he starts in Champions League for us. It's the biggest stage, and I just don't see Eddie Nketiah as a Champions League level player, and that's what we need.
Yeah, definitely. Again, I agree. I couldn't agree more. Um, so, in terms of Eddie Nketiah, again, Crystal Palace down is probably, the perfect way of putting it, to be fair. And that's no slant on the guy. He works hard. He obviously trains very well. Otherwise, Mikel Arteta wouldn't be such a big fan of him. But ability-wise, I don't think he's ever going to be good enough for Arsenal. So inevitably, at some point, he's going to have to be moved on. The only thing is the strikers market, Jess. I mean, have you had a look at the strikers market? Because I was looking the other day, and apart from Osimhen, Harry Kane, them kind of players, or Mbappe, which, let's be real about it, Arsenal are not going to sign. There isn't really a striker out there that stands out as if to say, right, let's bring him in, let's give him an opportunity.
Mm.
We're losing Balogun, we're losing Nketiah. We probably need to replace them two with at least one player. Like, there isn't really anyone that I can think of other than Ivan Toney, who's banned, that is like, yeah, let's go for it.
But I think that's why Arsenal would probably end up going for a Kudus or a João Felix, which wouldn't satisfy the appetite for a true center forward. It wouldn't, because it'd be another option quite similar to what we already have. But it would give Arsenal the opportunity to give Saka a backup, but also cover the center forward position. So then you have, Jesus, Trossard, Havertz, and really that suits our way of play at the moment. Like, the way that Arsenal play, it's like sharing the goals, very fluid. Everybody kind of plays center forward and all that kind of stuff. And doing that for another season, I think, is more than good enough, And then you get into next summer, and then you have the ability to go in for somebody that's going to really change the game for you. I'm a big advocate of waiting for the right player and not spending big money on a player that doesn't necessarily give you that oomph. And I think when you look at the strikers that are out there, none of them really feel like a marquee center forward signing for Arsenal Football Club. But if you wait until next summer, you may only get one player, but if that one player is Victor Osimhen, that feels worth it. Vlahovic, like, these guys, there's a reason why nobody's really in for Vlahovic, is probably because he's not as good as maybe people thought, or, he's kind of fallen off a little bit, whatever. So, I understand this need and want for the center forward. I completely get it. But, I can also see a world where Arsenal kind of perfect the way that we were playing last season, add more options through center forward, remove Eddie Nketiah from that equation, bring in somebody like a Kudus or a João Felix, and still go to another level, but then save yourself for a big center forward signing that's really going to change the game.
There's a great comment here from James who says Kane was league top scorer at Eddie's age. He's now 24. So, yeah, when you put it that way, James, I suppose, you can kind of say, yeah, that Eddie Nketiah is just simply not going to hit the heights. So, of course, last night's performance, Jess, 5-3, very, very comfortable victory for Arsenal in the end. I thought the first half we was a little bit slow, a little bit not quite with it. Of course, Lewandowski being one of the best strikers in Europe, the best strikers in probably of this generation, no doubt, was always going to score from 6 yards out. A few defensive errors from Arsenal again last night led to conceding the goals, of course. But Trossard, let's talk about him first, because he was even without the 2 goals that he scored, he was the outstanding player for me. He was just involved in everything good that Arsenal did yesterday. And it's funny, actually, because, we kind of touched on the United game and Eddie Nketiah and a few of these other fringe players, we would say, that come into the team, didn't really do anything. Trossard is also one of these players that's kind of on the fringes of breaking into the first team. And I think this is what pre-season's all about. It's for them players that are on the fringes that have the potential there to be given opportunities to give this manager a headache going into the season. Yeah. And Trossard did that perfectly last night. 2 goals, involved in everything that was good about Arsenal. You can't ask for more. And he has basically said to Arteta, look, you got a decision to make now, What did you make of his performance last night?
If the season started tomorrow, he starts at left wing, and it's not even really close. As much as I love Martinelli, when a player is putting in performances like Trossard and basically saying, choose me, you choose them, and I think Arteta had an opportunity to do that last season. But the moment that Jesus got to a level of fitness, he dropped Trossard. And so, I think you go with the players that are in form, even if the guys that, are not in form or coming back from injury are your favorites or the guys that you really rely upon. So I think, it's not just the performance against Barcelona. I also thought he was really good against the MLS All-Stars. And I know that that's not a good, bar, but I do think that, he really shone in both games. And against Barcelona, it just felt like, he just was perfect. The combination between him and Jesus, there seems to be something with them that they really go together and it really works. And I thought he was the best option in front of Havertz, which is important. I think whoever is going to be the center forward and the left wing in front of Havertz, it has to make sense. And having Jesus and Trossard in front of Havertz, they had that switching positions constantly, and it flowed. I think one thing about Trossard that somebody pointed out to me on my stream earlier was that out of everybody in our front line, he seems to be the one that wants to shoot on sight. And everybody else wants to walk the ball into the net, but he seems to take shots from anywhere. And that's something that you need in your forward players. And so, and he's a grown up, he's been around for a while. And so he's not like a kid trying to find his feet. He's somebody that could literally put so much pressure on that front line. And if we're honest, he could legitimately take Martinelli, Jesus, or Havertz spot. He's a great person to have in the squad. And I don't think it's just a squad guy, whatever, like a El Neni or something. This is somebody who can legitimately take somebody's starting position. I love Trossard. The next kit I get is going to be 19 Trossard. I love him. He's like an arson player. He just gives the vibes of somebody that can play anywhere. As long as there's other creative players around him, he thrives. And I loved everything I saw from him yesterday. 2 goals, just was absolutely everywhere. Defensively, he was good as well. He was doing a lot of pressing and tracking back. And he's just that guy. What a steal for 27 million or whatever it was. Such a steal. And even though Mudryk probably would have been, I think Mudryk is going to be a star, by the way. I never wavered from that. Even when we didn't get him, I didn't say I thought he was crap or anything. But for where Arsenal are right now, Trossard is probably a better fit because you need experienced players that can come in right away, don't need adaptation. The way Trossard just like that with us, knows how we play. He didn't have any sort of like, I need a couple of games. It was just boom, boom, just like that. And I think we may have lucked out in that way where we found a player that really fits what we're doing right now. But like I said, if the season starts tomorrow, I'm starting Trossard. I think he's just that good. He's just that sharp. Guy's really good. I love him. I do.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. When we brought in Trossard, I was actually one that was an advocate for Trossard. I was saying, why don't Arsenal go and sign Trossard?
Yeah.
All these guys that watch the channel regularly will know that as well. But, this guy, his technical ability is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. And, at 28 years old, like you say, he brings a bit of experience to the squad as well. He can play in multiple positions, and not just play in multiple positions. He can play in multiple positions to a high level and a high standard as well. And for me, like you say, I think he's probably been the standout player in this preseason for Arsenal, no doubt about it. And Mikel Arteta's got a big decision to make. But look, that's a good thing, as Arsenal fans, we've been crying out for this for God knows how many years, Jess. Like the manager's got a decision to make. Who do I play, Martinelli or Trossard? Well, we as fans don't mind either, to be honest with you. So it was a bit different when you was like coming in and saying, "Oh, who do I play, Rob Holding or Mustafi?" Like that's completely different. So it's good to have this kind of headache. Another player I wanted to kind of touch on last night as well. Of course, we're going to talk about Havertz in a minute, but Fabio Vieira with an absolute screamer from the edge of the box. And, he's another player that I've very much been calling out. I'm sure most of the Arsenal fans have been calling out as well. And, he did okay when he came on yesterday as well. So hopefully that goal there will give him a bit of confidence. Like, what did you make of him yesterday?
Well, I never sold my Fabio Vieira stocks because, first of all, I don't think that he's been given enough playing time, consistently to really show what he can do. And, I know some people feel like, you should just be able to come in off the bench and make an impact all the time. But I think certain players just need a little bit more time. And when you look at Fabio Vieira and how much time he spent in the first team at Porto, you'll realize that he was always going to be a little bit of a project signing, a little bit of something for the future, because he didn't even start to play really for Porto's first team until Luis Diaz left for Liverpool. So this is a very new to the situation type of player. And then going from Portugal to England without a preseason and coming in injured, there's just so many different factors where I don't think he had the greatest start. But this season, I was like, he needs to take control of his destiny. Like, people are not going to be as accommodating or as nice about it. Like, you need to start showing what you can do. And what I like is I think we found his position. For a while, we were putting him on the left-hand side, and I don't think that suited him very well. He's definitely more of a Odegaard backup. Playing off of the right-hand side suits him so much more. And it wasn't just even the goal that he scored yesterday. I thought he was, combative. I saw him push some guys over. Like, I thought in the last couple of games, he was a lot more physical than he usually is. And he had a couple of decent moments. So, yeah, I haven't sold my Fabio Vieira stocks. I think he's a really talented player. He is not Odegaard, which I think people expect you to be. If you're coming in for the player that, has left, you need to be just like him. He's a different player. He's a final third guy. And you can see that when he gets into the final third, he usually leaves with something, an assist or a goal. The guy has good ball striking ability. Like, he just knows what to do around the box. But, it's the other parts of the game outside the box where you're trying to figure out if he fits in there. So, yeah, I think this is a good step. Hopefully it'll give him confidence. I do think he lost confidence midway through the season when he kind of played well and then he kind of dropped off a little bit. So we'll see what happens with Vieira, but I would say don't sell your stocks just yet because he could be the type of player that needs a season, like a full season to kind of get going. But once he gets going, I think he's going to be a really good player for us.
Definitely. Thank you, by the way, LJ Brown, for the first ever super chat on the channel. Big up to you, who says Trossard should start when Saka drops off. No doubt, Trossard can play anywhere across that front three and do just as a good of job as any of them front three players, of course. And Fabio Vieira, interesting one. It's a big season for him at Arsenal, I think. A lot of the issues that I feel like he had last season was just like he looked very, let's just say, weak and feeble on and off the ball. And we know how physical the Premier League is. You need to kind of bulk up a little bit. You need to be strong. I mean, I see Bukayo Saka last night, shrugging players off. And he's not exactly the biggest of guys, but the strength of the boy is just unreal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Fabio Vieira needs, I think. I don't think it's a case of, the guy hasn't got talent. He sure as hell has. But I think he definitely needs to kind of bulk himself up a little bit. But yeah, hopefully the goal gives him a little bit of, confidence going into the season. And yeah, hopefully we see much better performances than we did last season from him.
Yeah.
Who do we go with next? Let's go Kai Havertz, shall we? Let's go Kai Havertz because, Jess, honest to God, after Manchester United, I was tearing my hair out. I ain't even lying. Like, I'm going grey as it is, but I'm trying.
Yeah.
I'm going to go bold as well. I'm not even joking. And yeah, it was kind of like, what are we doing here? Like, why did we spend 65 million on this guy? He's not proven himself in the league. He's had very average seasons. Going over the whole thing over and over again, and he looked really, I would say, in that game, out of his depth and uncomfortable in that midfield position. But last night, he was so much better with Thomas Partey behind him. It just goes to show what we said at the beginning of the show, changing too many pieces in that midfield can cause Arsenal an issue. So maybe, keep Partey in there, keep Odegaard, and have either Rice or Havertz. I think that would probably make more sense. Like, what did you make of Kai Havertz yesterday?
Oh, yeah, we needed that. We needed signs of life, on Planet Havertz. We did, because for him, it's like we have to see that he's willing to fight for his career, I think, because Arteta took a big risk on him and he's been poor for like 3 years now. So it's not just he can't just kind of sit around and let it happen. He has to almost like really push and make it happen himself. And I think he kind of was like a little bit of a passenger against United. I think we really struggled on that side. I thought that side got eaten up. But in this game, it seemed like we got the balance a little bit better. And I think people have to remember that, like, we were so used to playing with Xhaka and Zinchenko on that side with Martinelli that literally changing everything was always going to be like such a shock. But it seemed like Arteta kind of realized that, like, okay, you need to put somebody else on that left-hand side as a left back. When you have Partey, he just knows where to be at the right time. And it created like the perfect platform for Havertz to kind of do his thing. And it's just something about the way that Trossard and Havertz play together that makes me feel like that's the right combination. Now, if you play Martinelli there, I think things are a little bit different because Martinelli is like a touchline winger type. And Trossard likes to come central. But yesterday, the combination was just perfect. And I thought he looked lively. He scored a goal. And I know people say it was just a tap in, but, being at the right place at the right time is something that, Xhaka did a lot of last season. And I think that's what Havertz will do a lot of that as well. And he just looked happy, light. He looked like somebody that was relaxed. And that's so important. He had that one moment where he kind of passed it on one side of Dest and ran on the other. And then Araujo did that really hard tackle on him. I was like, that's the kind of stuff I want to see. Just not passing backwards and playing it safe, but doing a little bit of something different. And so I think, Havertz is a long way to go still, because I think what we're looking for is some version of the Bayer Leverkusen Kai Havertz. And if you've watched that Havertz, you know that there's a lot further to go. But just the growth from that first kind of like, I guess, seeing him in the skills challenge and people panicking to like now, I think you can see that like all he really needs is some playing time and play with the right guys, and he's gonna probably just be just fine. I'm not as worried about it anymore. But like I said, there's still a ways to go. But I think a lot of us really needed to see him play that game yesterday.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely
Yeah.
think Kai Havertz is more of a confidence player, no doubt. I think when he gets his confidence up, I think you'll see the best from him. And it's nice to see that he's shown a bit of fight for his career as well. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of Arsenal fans on his back, and I was one of them. I was one of
Ah,
them. So
no.
it can't be easy for him coming into this side and being
Yeah.
expected to play a different way and hit the ground running as well, because that is what these new signings need to do. They need to kind of hit the ground running. We haven't really got that much time to settle in and stuff like that, because we've got to try and compete with Manchester City, a treble winning Manchester City as well. So it's going to be difficult. And but do you think Keenan here makes a good point? He says here, you got to take into account that we were playing Barca. Havertz is going to look better because they give us more space, and Premier League teams are going to pressure the hell out of him.
I think there's a little bit of that, but I also think that you know, Barcelona have more quality than a lot of the other teams in the Premier League. I think if you put Barcelona in the Premier League, they'd probably finish in the top four. So I think you can say, yeah, he had more space, but you can also say that he was playing against better opposition. And so we just have to see how it is when he's pressed a little bit more by different players. But I think because Arsenal play with so much like dominance and possession, and teams, they try to press us. Once we pass through them a couple times, they tend to back off. And I think once we do that with Havertz, regardless if it's Brentford or Sheffield United or Luton Town or Crystal Palace or whatever, I think he'll do fine. I think where I worry about him a little bit more is up north. Newcastle, Manchester City, Man United, Liverpool. I think those are the games away from home where I'll be a little bit more like, okay, what can we do to be a little bit more maybe combative? But I'm going to tell you guys right now, I'm not worried about Havertz against the rest of the league. I'm not, because we'll be dominant. We'll have most of the ball. And once we pass through their press a couple of times, they back off. We know the drill, So, yeah, but in regard, and also, I think Keenan does make a good point about having more space. I think that will really help somebody like a Fabio Vieira, because I actually think he'll do really well in Europe. I think he'll do well in Europe because it's not as physical. But yeah, I think you have the pressing and the pressure, but we're better than so much of the teams that I feel like even when they try to be physical or press us, most of the time, once we get by them a couple times, they kind of back off anyway.
Okay. Gabby Jesus, another player who was very, 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 very good for Arsenal again yesterday. It's probably the best that I've seen him play for a few months, to be fair. I mean, obviously he's come back off the big injury that he had 3 months out. Didn't really get a chance to get back to full fitness. He was kind of thrown in at the deep end, like you say. Trossard coming out after being Player of the Month in April, and Jesus coming back into the team. Not really hitting the heights that we saw at the beginning of last season, but against Barcelona yesterday, he looked like he was back to his best. The way that he was drifting out left, right. Some of the that skill move in the box to kind of sit, I can't even remember who the defender was, on his ass, was like, mate, this guy is just ridiculous when it comes to things like that. But yeah, he had a very good performance as well yesterday. Yeah. What do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I think with Jesus, I just wanted to see him kind of look like what we knew him to be at the beginning of last season. And I worried about what that injury was going to do to him. But yesterday he looked like his normal self, which is great. And what he gives us is just that fluidity. And because he can play on the left or the right, and he's such a great dribbler, he just does so much for us. I think his dribbling is so underrated for our team. Saka and Martinelli are good dribblers, but he's our best dribbler. He's just the guy that knows how to create space in the box, you know, take defenders out of the game completely by just dribbling. And so I think, I like to see that he looks like his old self, and we really need him as confident as possible because he's going to be so important for us next season, I think. The one thing about Jesus though is that like he scored 11 goals and got 6 assists last season. And I think he really needs to push to try to get close to 20 this season. I think people say, well, it's because of his injury that he didn't really hit the GA that you probably would expect. But I think we forget that before that, right? Pretty much right after the Tottenham game, he fell off a little bit in terms of his goal scoring. So I think there's pressure on Jesus to be the person that can score those goals. And he's never really done it before. I think it's a mental thing rather than a capabilities thing. But if he could get close to 17, 18 goals this season, I think that'll do him a world of good. I really, really do, because it's not that he doesn't have the talent. It's something going on up here where he starts to overthink. But he was really good yesterday. I like to see him smiling, dribbling, looking fresh, really putting his body on the line. I thought he held up the ball really well in certain circumstances. I love Jesus. I think he's kind of underrated sometimes now with the fan base. I think people are kind of annoyed by him at times, but I think people forget the levels that he took us to last season. And so hopefully we see more of first part of the season, Jesus, of last season, not so much towards the end, because I think he lost quite a bit of confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right. I think that's the one thing that's kind of hanging over Jesus's head is the goal scoring.
Yeah.
I think that's partly the reason why a lot of Arsenal fans, including myself, think we need, a goal scoring striker, somebody who can come up with the 20 goals a season. If he could prove that to us this season, though, that he can come up with them sort of numbers, everything else about his game is just exceptional. Like you cannot. He even makes better players around him so much better. You see how much better Saka was and Martinelli was last season in terms of their output. And that was just through having Gabriel Jesus linking up with them. And when he was out of the side, there wasn't quite the same level as what there
Not
was
the
when he was in.
same.
So, yeah.
It's not the same. He adds so much with his pressing and his physicality. And like when he's physically up for it and he's mentally in it, he's very difficult to play against. And I think people view him because he's small. They're like, he doesn't have any presence, but he does. It's just a matter of, sometimes when he's not physically up for it, then he is a soft touch. But like yesterday, when you saw when he was on it, he was giving them nightmares. And so hopefully that's what we get to see. And maybe if Arteta rotates a little bit more, we can keep him fresher for longer, because we're going to need that guy badly this season. He's going to be so important.
And lastly, before we touch on Xavi and Arteta, because I wanted to talk about, what they had to say in the press conferences and that. Bukayo Saka, like this kid, he just gets better and better and better and better. Of course, he missed the penalty yesterday. I kind of, he's got it out of the way now. Hopefully he doesn't miss many more penalties. We see him obviously miss an important one last season against West Ham. Again yesterday. Hope that doesn't become a habit for him. But like for a young, small built guy, the strength of him is just unreal. Left foot, right foot, you name it. He just gets better and better. Like we're getting that edging that ever so close now, Jess, to maybe even calling him world class. I don't know what you think about that.
I think, like, from my perspective, I felt like I feel like Saka is world class, but I feel like outsiders to recognize it, he's going to have to do it on the biggest stage. And he's already done it in the World Cup. He's done it at the Euros. But I think Champions League is kind of like that last little piece missing. I think that's when you really gain that like notoriety and stuff like that. And he didn't play that much in the Europa League, but he will play a lot in Champions League. So I think Saka is definitely somebody that if he can maintain his numbers or even surpass them from last season and, help us win trophies and play really well in the Champions League, people will definitely consider it because if we're really honest, like he's probably the best right winger right now, like in the world, like on form for a while. And if we just take form out of it, it's probably him and just Mo Salah. Maybe one other, like Riyad Mahrez is obviously really good, but I think Saka's been really performing at a high level for a long time. So, yeah, I think all of our players, by the way, Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard in particular, and Saliba, if they can perform in Champions League, we win something this season, and they perform if as good or better than they did last season, they will be considered world class. I think not playing in the Champions League, it's really hard to make that claim. But with Saka, what I always think about is how close is he to Vinny Jr. Because I think Vinny Jr. for me is the template for Saka in terms of what you want. Now, Vinny Jr. has Rashford speed, so Saka doesn't have Rashford speed, so he doesn't have that. But in terms of the physicality, the trickery, the finishing, and how you scare the opponent, I think he's getting closer and closer to Vinny Jr. And that's always going to be my comp for him because I think Vinny Jr. is just the best. Like, I think he's just the best. So Saka getting that physical where he just kind of can knock guys off the ball, I think that's the next level that he's getting to. He's so good and so consistent. So yeah, I can see him definitely going to the next level again because he goes to another level every single season. I love Saka. Like, I mean, it's every day we're talking about how great he is, but it's just that's just who he is, like he's the guy, like he's the face. So yeah, great performance from him yesterday. I think he's had a great preseason. He looks ready to go. It's just about getting in that Champions League on that biggest stage and performing against the big guys in those competitions. And I think people will really start talking about him.
Yeah, definitely. I think of all the players that are in the team, apart from maybe Saliba, obviously because he kind of holds that back line together. I think Bukayo Saka is arguably our most important player. Everything that's good about Arsenal seems to revolve around him. We kind of see last season in the last 8 games that when, we was kind of dropping points and not hitting the levels that we originally was, Bukayo Saka kind of, went missing in them 8 games as well. He had a bit of a drop off as well.
Yep.
So I think that drastically affects, the team and just shows you how important this guy is. And I think he's going to have a very good season for Arsenal yet again. I can't.
Yeah.
What was he? 11 goals last season? Was it 11 goals?
Like 11 goals and then like a lot of assists. Like,
Yeah, I think it was like 11 goals, 10 assists or something like that. I think he could do better than that this season. I think
actually 14 goals, 11 assists. So he was
14
beyond that.
goals, 11 assists. So, I think it will do even better than that this season, especially if
Yeah.
it all clicks and it all comes together. But yeah, this guy just gets better and better. And like, what more can we say, Jess? Like, just
Does
hope
he
that
need
we.
competition for his spot though? Because like I keep hearing people say like he needs competition for his spot. And I'm just wondering because like obviously I'd love to have somebody there. But if you're somebody that's coming into Arsenal, but the person that you have to beat out for your position is Bukayo Saka, I think you're looking at it like, is there somewhere else I can go where it's more of a fair fight? I wonder if Saka ends up being more like a Mo Salah for us because Mo Salah has never had a backup ever. He plays every single game for Liverpool. There's really nobody else. There's tons of guys that can play on the left, but nobody else can play on the right. And they kind of rely upon him to be always fit and so consistent. And so, like, of course, I would love to see like a Kudus or somebody like that come in. But, would you want to be a player, a young player at that, coming in and actually fighting for your spot against Bukayo Saka? Like, that's, what do you do?
It's not something I would want to do. Let's put it that way. But
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tough one, Jess, because like I say, he's such an important player for this team. I
Yeah.
mean, again, like we kind of spoke about Nketiah earlier and the job that he did for Arsenal last season. We're still kind of agreeing that, maybe he should be moved on this summer. Reece
Yeah.
Nelson is Bukayo Saka's backup. I've heard that he's picked up an injury again.
Yeah.
He did okay for Arsenal when he had to come in last season, but say for an example, if Bukayo Saka picks up a big injury or a long-term injury, can we trust Reece Nelson to maintain the level?
I know I don't. I think he's a good squad filler, like the next guy down, but definitely not the first guy up if Martinelli or Saka were to get injured. You know, I think Reece Nelson, it was a good idea to extend him, one, because you don't want to lose somebody like that talented for free, but you have a very quality option in the team, but he's definitely not like I would love for there to be somebody in between him, like Saka, then somebody else, then Nelson. You know, that's how I'm kind of feeling about it right now. Um, yeah. And I'd love for us, like I said, to sell Balogun and Nketiah. And then bring somebody in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay. Xavi. Let's talk about what Xavi had to say, because there's been a bit of to-ing and fro-in. Obviously it stems back to the Man United game. We remember Martinez with that crunching tackle on Saka. A lot of Arsenal fans were very up in arms about that one. We actually see Martinez give a crunching tackle to Bellingham yesterday as well. So that's something that he seems to be doing a lot of in this pre-season.
His brand. That's what
And
I'm
Xavi complaining after the game about the physicality that Arsenal showed against Barcelona yesterday, which I thought was extremely weird considering, Arejo's tackle on Kai Havertz. I thought, you're watching the right team here, bro. But, what do you make of that, Jess? Because, yes, it's pre-season. You don't want your players to pick up injuries, but these are competitive games. Like, this is a Champions League fixture ultimately. Barcelona or Arsenal could meet each other in the Champions League later on this season. So there's going to be a competitiveness there, and I expected to see that in the Man United game as well. The only thing was we weren't at the races in that game. So yeah, I mean, what do you make of his comments?
I think this is where I love Arteta, because after the Man United game, he didn't say, "Oh, I think, Man United were being too rough or too intense or whatever." He said it was a good test for us, and he's glad that that happened because then we can learn from it. And as much as people complain about the way that Arteta speaks in press conferences, the last thing you want is your manager after a loss coming out and saying, "Well, the other team just was more intense than us, and it's not really a game to be intense." So, whatever. And so I thought Xavi was trying to figure out a way to make it seem like, they lost, but it wasn't because of, it was because Arsenal were just taking it more serious and they weren't taking it serious. Like the amount of fouls, the amount of times that they fouled us, they were taking it serious. It was just, I think we were further along in our preseason than they were. That's what I think. I think they had missed the game against Juventus. So I would imagine that kind of put them behind a little bit. And we needed to show that we were up for it because we had just had almost like the same treatment from United. So I think it was just a matter of we were better. We were further along. And when they tried to come back with something, we just bested them. And so you can't tell me with Araujo or whatever his name is tackling, Kai Havertz in the first 2 minutes that it was us that was being overly aggressive and intense. I think maybe they thought that we would be a light touch. And when we started playing and we started kind of playing them off of the park in some circumstances, they got frustrated, but physically they couldn't keep up with us. And then so he started complaining. The score line may have been 5-3, but we were miles better than them, I thought. On the day, watching it with my two eyes, I was like, you could tell which team was better. And so I think Xavi wanted to make it seem like they weren't taking it serious, but they were taking it serious. They just couldn't keep up with us. That's how I feel about it. He needs to stop whining. Like, that was just weird. Don't play in games against competitive teams. Play against second, tier Spanish teams if you don't want it to be competitive, because there's no way a game between Barcelona and Arsenal are going to have two teams just jogging around doing nothing. It's not happening,
Yeah. Yeah, it just seemed very, very strange to me to hear people complaining about, rough tackles and stuff like this. It's competitive. It's competitive game between
Yeah, I
teams.
mean, I didn't love, like, obviously, like, when it was happening to us, I didn't love the feeling of being on the receiving end and feeling like physically we couldn't really handle it. But I just felt like they were in a better physical condition than we were. And we kind of, I think, were going into it like this is preseason, and they came into it like we're trying to make a statement. And so we got shown like on that day. But I don't think there's anything wrong with being intense in preseason, because I think it's hard, unless you're Man City, it's hard to turn it off and turn it on. I think you have to turn it on and stay on, because if you wait all the way up until Nottingham Forest to turn it on, you may not be able to, if that makes sense. So I want to see my team hard tackles, looking like we could start the season. But in La Liga, they don't have to have an intense preseason. It's going to be them and Real Madrid at the top fighting like it always is. Like there's no threat to them. So I think from their perspective, I don't think they get it that like literally it is a 6-7 potential horse race for, to win the title or make top 4 or whatever. So we can't take it easy. It's not the same.
Yeah, I agree. And surely knew this was coming. Like after the poor performance and the poor showing against Man United, Arteta, you could tell in his press conference after that game that he was a little bit like annoyed at the players because they didn't really
He was
show
annoyed at
anything.
the players, not
Yeah,
at United. He was annoyed at us, and he should have been, because we just didn't show up, and we were so much better than that. And we got shown like United wanted to make a statement, and they did,
yeah.
and I think we felt that. I think we felt that.
Yeah, exactly. So, Xavi should have knew what was, coming. And I'm just surprised to hear it from, somebody who we could argue is probably one of the best midfielders to grace, football in this generation in Xavi. And you're a competitor yourself, mate. Like you used to play for Barcelona, the best Barcelona that there ever has been. And surely this. Like it's a competitive game
None of
against
our
the
players
European team.
none of our players put in any of like the similar tackles that Araujo did or Lissandro Martinez did. Nobody did. I rewatched the game. Nobody put in any tackles like that. It was very much like, I know we did a lot of tactical fouls, but I also thought physically we were just up a level than them. We were bodying them, and like Ben White got called for several fouls that in the Premier League are not fouls. Like they're just not. You just weren't strong enough to hold up the ball, and he just kind of shoved you in the back and you fell on the ground. So I think he just has to keep it 100. His boys weren't up for it. And it wasn't the same Arsenal that he was used to playing. We weren't a soft touch, That's we
Yeah.
weren't a soft touch.
Yeah, we're not a soft touch anymore, thank God. But listen,
Yeah.
guys, we're going to wrap it up on that because Jess has got an early flight in the morning. Needs to go and get some rest. I don't blame you, Jess. But
I need that
there we
nap.
go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Of course, make sure you hit the likes on the way out and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Thank you for the first ever super chat. Who was that, by the way?
LJ Brown.
LJ Brown, big up yourself. Thank you for that super chat. The first ever on the channel. So I appreciate that one. And look, guys, if you want to become a member of the channel, you can do that as well. Memberships are available. Just have a look into that. And I will be back again with some more content tomorrow. And I'm sure Jess will as well. You got anything going on, Jess, tomorrow? I know you're flying back, ain't you?
Well, I'm going to land in London around like 3 p.m. So I'll probably get home around like 5. So unless something serious happens, y'all probably won't see me, because as soon as I get in the house, I'm probably going to hit the bed. Like I'm going to keep it all the way 100. But I have like my vlog from the Arsenal game from last night. It's going to come out sometime next week. So yeah, but probably not tomorrow, guys.
So there you go. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled for that one as well. And go over to AFTV and check out Jess's fan cam from last night as well. But yeah, that's all we have time for, guys. I'm going to wrap it up here. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. We're out.
Bye.